Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That Football Podcast, episode 2. Martino, Puccio, Matt Santangelo, alongside you guys. We have the 4 topics of the day. As you can see, the first one is breaking news because as of today, Mo Salah has announced that he is leaving Liverpool. One of the greatest legacies in the sport, especially in the Premier League, Matt. So we're going to be talking about not only his legacy at Liverpool, but here is the question regarding Mo Salah. Is he the greatest ever signing outside of the Premier League in the league's history? Talking about the past 30 years or so. Is it Mo Salah or Cristiano Ronaldo, the better signing in the Premier League?
Not to become prisoner of the moment, because I think Mohamed Salah is one of the Premier League's most decorated footballers of all time, not just in recent 25, 30 years, but I still think it's Cristiano Ronaldo because I think of the way he took over this league and there was pure dominance in that era. I mean, you saw the free kicks, you had not just the play on the field, but the personality, the swagger, the ego, the hairstyles, and he backed it up with his play on the field. And of course, everyone's going to look and say, okay, well, that's all great, but did he actually win trophies? And obviously, of course, under Fergie at Manchester United, he absolutely won plenty of trophies. Then there's a conversation of, well, did he have more of a supporting cast than Salah did at any point at his Liverpool career? And I think you could make a strong case that both players had plenty of quality around them. But I think in the end, Ronaldo is the better of the two acquisitions ever by Premier League clubs.
I think it's Mo for longevity purposes. Team awards for trophies to me are kind of silly because it's always circumstantial in these arguments. Like Manchester City is who they were going up against. The Liverpool sides that didn't end up winning the leagues with Mo Salah would have won tons of leagues in different parts of their eras in which they played in. Mo Salah as an individual from the second he stepped in was dominating. And Cristiano Ronaldo reached heights that Salah didn't eventually get to because of the Ballon d'Or awards. But, Salah was going up against, obviously, Cristiano at Real Madrid and Messi. At that time, Cristiano was definitely the best player in the world in 2008, but he was also on a loaded team and they weren't facing off against the most legendary sides. Like Salah is helping lead and captain. He gets hurt in a Champions League final where Sergio Ramos basically destroys his shoulder. So he doesn't even get the opportunity in that one. They lose another heartbreaker. They got to 3 of those finals. And also, if we're talking about like actually achieving trophies, winning Liverpool's first Premier League title in like 30 years was a very big deal. I don't know if people remember that, but that's a huge thing. He won it twice. He's been the best player on that team every single time. You could obviously argue that for Cristiano Ronaldo, but it was 36 million euro. We knew about him as a player. He was a flop at Chelsea, but his longevity at Liverpool, the amount that they won, he's the signal, honestly, of that turnaround of the club. I know you could point to Jurgen Klopp, but Salah is the poster boy. Cristiano Ronaldo joined a well-oiled machine, and I just think for those purposes, Salah is the greatest signing.
I think
Cristiano was the better player, though.
The one thing I want to push back on, though, is I think in the era that Ronaldo was at Manchester United, that was a stronger Premier League. I think those early 2000s to when he left to go to Real Madrid, I think that is a stronger Premier League than the one that Salah dominated in. No disrespect to City and some of these other teams.
I think the top teams were like in the mid to late 2000s, right? Like Arsenal is a better like third team than anything else in the Prem currently, or like even at Salah's peak. Yeah. There was really only 2 teams in this one, but City were the Centurions. They've been dominating the Premier League. Like I think City would win a league in any era during the Premier League's history. So to like win the league is tougher, arguably, than when it was then. Yes, more quality towards the top, but like the best team, like City is the dynasty. And I know there was obviously United prior to Cristiano Ronaldo and they were winning those titles, but no one has dominated like Pep City has. So that's enough. Someone who isn't dominating at all and really just has been failing time and time and time again are beloved Azzurri. They play against Northern Ireland in the World Cup playoffs this Thursday as we record on Tuesday. Italy have failed to make the last two World Cups. They are on the brink of potentially missing a third straight World Cup. You thought it would never happen again after the first one, but then it happened again. Italy has a lot more humility heading into this playoff against Northern Ireland. If they were to win, they would face off against Bosnia and Wales, the winner of that matchup. Ultimately, Matt, does Italy qualify for the 2026 World Cup?
Absolutely, Italy will exercise their demons and qualify for the 2026 World Cup in North America. Look, historically speaking, and in more recent years, Italy has thrived when they've been overlooked, looked down on, maybe been a bit of a media punching bag and turned into somewhat of a meme, right? You looked at Calciopoli and everyone goes into that 2006 World Cup thinking, they're not really the same power. You look what's going back home in their domestic league, right? They win the World Cup. 2012, yes, they come up against an exceptional dynasty in Spain, but kind of surprised a lot of people to get to that Euro final. Same thing in the 2020 Euro, right? They had the failures of the previous, not making the previous World Cup. They go into that team and they actually dominate. They play Italian football. They were good defensive. They were well coached. Their key players at the time rose to the occasion, had huge pivotal moments, and they surprised many people on their way to winning that Euro. So I think they get it done. I think there is going to be resilience within this team. And I think that Sandro Tonali and Manuel Locatelli, who have been probably Italy's two most informed players this entire season, the way I look at it, are going to set the tone in that midfield. And I think they're going to help Italy get over the hump and qualify.
Yeah, I think Italy make it to the 2026 World Cup. I don't think they're going to make it easy. They never make it easy.
Yeah.
Northern Ireland, they should win against this lineup. Even in the weakest points in this team, if Gianluca Mancini starts, if Matteo Politano starts, these are still a Serie A winner multiple times with Napoli starting at that club, regardless of what you think of them. And Gianluca Mancini starts at Roma. There's zero excuses for it. They have a manager that's going to come in and pretty much demand them to give them their all. I don't think that there's a deer in the headlights with Ventura. There isn't some silly mistake that would happen against Northern Macedonia. How many times would that stuff happen? Italy's been playing a good brand of football. Norway was phenomenal in the World Cup qualifying stages. You could argue Italy far and away the second best team, the best team of all the second place teams that were qualifying for the World Cup. They are also victims of their region. And I'm not saying that they should make it based off of that, but they showed that they have enough quality to do so. The front two of Keane and Retegui, if they start together, I had no worries about that. The defense has enough talent to manage it. The goalkeeper, when in form, is the best shot stopper in the world, who's been in poor form as of late, but he understands the gravity of this moment. The only issue I have is potentially the gaping hole centrally. Is Barella going to come up and play a good match? He started off well against Fiorentina, and then he faded off in that game. They need him at his best. They need Bastoni to be healthy. I don't think that they're going to think that there's some rightful honor or place into this World Cup of theirs. They understand what's at stake. They have had actually more pressure than any team ever to make this World Cup, because a third, it's unprecedented, just like the first two were. This would be utterly catastrophic, and I don't think that you actually bounce back from that anytime soon. Unfortunately for Northern Ireland, they're going to have to face that Italy. And I think regardless of what people think and the perception of this side, they're going to qualify. And I think they're going to give hell to either Wales or Bosnia, wherever they have to go to play them, because they know at the end of the day, they have enough quality to qualify. They have a manager who's been there and won the actual trophy as a player.
Mhm.
Italy are going to qualify for the 2026 World Cup, but it's not going to be pretty. What isn't pretty is Arsenal. They lost another cup final and Carabao Cup against City. This is just one of those things and situations with Arsenal that we know that they're good. They're likely the best team in the Premier League. They're likely to win the Premier League with their gap at the moment. It would be catastrophic if they did not. They have an opportunity to win a trophy that would push them towards a potential quadruple. They end up starting Kepa. Kepa makes huge blunders in this match against City. Nico O'Reilly scores a brace. That was pretty much it. Arsenal didn't do much on the ball, but it kept adding and feeding into this narrative. Will Arsenal get over the hump? And City are clearly that team that's bullying them mentally, physically over the years that are blocking Arsenal from winning a major honor. We're not saying the Carabao Cup is that type of major honor. We've seen Arsenal win the FA Cup, whatever, the Community Shield. But we all know at the end of the day, the only thing that will ultimately define this Arsenal side and squad is, can they win the Premier League? Can they get over the hump? Will they prevent themselves from collapsing against Manchester City? And even despite that display and loss at Wembley against City, I think they're still going to win the Premier League. They're 9 points up with a game in hand. I think that there's a little bit too much panic. This is an elite defensive squad, and they're not going to have Kepa Arrizabalaga in goal for these uber important matches, not only in the Premier League, but also the Champions League. Arsenal, will they get it done and win the Premier League, Matt?
In the end, I think Arsenal lift the Premier League trophy. To your point, 9 point gap between City and Arsenal. Of course, City has that game in hand. Let's assume they win it, right? And it's sixth. I still think that Arsenal, with the recent defeat to City in the Carabao Cup, on top of that, of being so close in some of the more recent seasons and sniffing it and falling up short, I think that something has to give within that changing room, with that coach, within that fan base. I think they're going to be galvanized behind that common goal of wanting to get over the hump and get this trophy to their trophy cabinet. So I think they're going to win the Premier League this year. I think it's going to be tight. I think City, with respect to Pep and the group that he's built over there, are going to make it very interesting. There's going to be moments of tension and doubt for Arsenal fans. But in the end, I think they will get over the hump and they will win it with 3 to 4 points cushion.
I think Arsenal win the Premier League, and losing the Carabao Cup was the exact type of loss that they needed. It is a wake-up call. They've been getting on by because City have been dropping points in the league against opponents that they shouldn't, and Arsenal have trouble scoring multiple goals in matches where they should, right? Like, they're defensively sound. They don't play the most attractive brand, but at the end of the day, they're getting those results. City, I question. They're not the strongest of teams. They didn't even play their strongest 11. Neither team really played their strongest 11. Obviously, you could argue Arsenal tried to go all in for this one. It just doesn't matter at the end of the day. When you have goalkeepers making mistakes like that, David Raya has been very strong for Arsenal. I don't think he's one of the greatest goalkeepers I've ever seen. No denying that. But that defense is so stout. It is so difficult to beat Arsenal, let alone have them, like, just not win a game. You also have to beat Arsenal. And for that, it's really difficult. They have enough quality up front to still win this league. I will say this, though. They aren't winning as much because they're not going all in on attackers. These guys that they have in this squad, no one is a stud guaranteed 20, 25 goals, all competitions. I look around, I see this guy can give me 10 to 15 here. There's multiple players like that. Arsenal need a literal gunner, pun intended. They don't need to mess around and keep buying these players. Will they or won't they? I understand Victor Yurkish. They went in for that. They hope for more. He's been awful. You have to go in and eventually grab somebody, because it could just be a one-off, because you know what City's finances. Ultimately, I think Arsenal get over the hump. They win the Premier League. They still could win the FA Cup. I think the Champions League is up for grabs in general. I don't think they have that killer to win it, but ultimately, I think Arsenal end up winning the Premier League. And the final topic of the day, one that has been pretty much a hot topic for a little bit of time now, ever since Michael Carrick has taken over at Manchester United. That's Bruno Fernandes, Player of the Year in the Premier League. I don't think there's a clear-cut player, right, Matt? A lot of this is coming from, City with Haaland. They're probably not going to win it, and Haaland hasn't had the greatest season by his standards. You would say if you give it to an Arsenal player, it's probably a defender, but we know how people view defenders these days. Probably not like that Van Dijk level of historical greatness that we've seen from a player. And pretty much any other club that you look at in the Premier League, there isn't a guy in any of these sides that you point to and say, yeah, that dude's carrying them, like a Cole Palmer has been recently out of a side that is not winning. Manchester United have tossed themselves into a top four conversation. I think that reflects so poorly on the Premier League. Is Bruno Fernandes the Player of the Year in the Premier League? Would you give it to him? He's getting the goal contributions.
There's a strong case to be made about Bruno Fernandes winning the Premier League Player of the Year. I think you look at the impact beyond just the numbers, which are outstanding, right? Somebody's 8 goals 16 assists in the Premier League. He's been at the very heart of this Manchester United turnaround. I mean, you came into this season looking at, Ruben Amorim, looking at the project they built, some of the other pieces they sort of been compiling in recent markets, and they were still falling short. And it felt like it was going to be another season of misery for United fans. Carrick comes in, and with that, Bruno Fernandes completely takes the reins and is spearheading this team to a potential top four finish, which would be unprecedented and frankly a huge surprise given where they were a couple months ago when Carrick took over. I will say this though, I think that if Arsenal get over the hump, like we both believe they will, I think voters and people that have a say in this award are going to get caught up and enamored by what we have to give it to someone at Arsenal. Right. And that's no disrespect to some of the players and individual contributors within that team, like Declan Rice, Saliba, Gabriel. They've had a lot of great players this year. Right. But to your point, I don't think any individual player has compiled the contributions and chance creation numbers that Bruno Fernandes has compiled so far.
The gap between Manchester United and Man City is closer than the gap between City and Arsenal.
Which is crazy.
People who don't really know or follow enough in the Prem, if you don't. Obviously, again, City have that one game less played. They have to face off against Palace. Ultimately, it always feels like the team who ends up winning the Premier League or any league in this sport ends up picking a player from that team to win the award. Now, I think Arsenal will end up winning the Premier League. Thus, brings me to who out of that team side deserves to win it. Ultimately, I do think it's going to be Gabriel if they had to pick a player from Arsenal. I don't think that there's any forward within Arsenal that deserves it. It's really been a team effort when they score goals. It's not really just a bomber that they have up front. Declan Rice, I think there would be an argument. Saliba's kind of right there with Gabriel. Gabriel has this elite defensive play, and on top of it, he's actually scoring goals sometimes. They've been so good, and that's who I think would win it ultimately. That's who I think will win it. Who I think should win it is obviously the outfield player that's carrying a side that looked like, heading into the year, some people were asking, are Manchester United going to get relegated? That's how little Ruben Amorim was winning with United. They were flirting with it almost last year. They had historically awful sides, but Manchester United was in an area that club should never be in. Then all of a sudden, Michael Carrick comes in. He's been a lot more pragmatic, putting players in positions that they're naturally a part of and should be playing in, aka Amad Diallo, and then obviously Kobe Mainu whenever he gets an opportunity. He's not overcomplicating things. I think they've been playing a good brand. Ultimately, you can't argue with these numbers that Bruno is putting up. They are elite. No one in the league is like kind of close to that. Maybe Haaland, but Haaland is a goal scorer. And I think there's a narrative against him that if he isn't scoring like 30 plus goals, that's how high his standard is, that he isn't player of the year, right? Like when he came in first season, you're like, oh, that's player of the year. There's like no discussion. The guy's like utterly dominant. You don't necessarily say that about Haaland these days, even though I think he's incredible. He's the best 9 in the world. Bruno Fernandes is doing everything. He's creating. He takes set pieces. Obviously, he scores a good amount of penalties. He's obviously creating with assists. There is a lot of negative talk around him and how some fans want him out. He's just the most productive player. You cannot argue with the contributions. At the end of the day, he's doing his job. He's scoring and he's assisting. Whether or not like you think he's like this perfect player that you want to compare with all these other players around the world or from the players of the past, fact is he's producing more than anyone else. His team is in the top 4 conversation. They're not going to win the league, so I don't think he's going to be player of the year, but he should at least be one of those options. To insinuate that Bruno Fernandes like doesn't deserve that, I think it's just like a disservice and feeding into this narrative that he isn't as good as some people think, and it's Manchester United fans just propping up the type of player that he is. At the end of the day, spade's a spade, man. Dude's just killing it, and I'm not going to be one of those people who's going to sit there and say, no, he doesn't deserve to be in this conversation. I think he deserves to be. Ultimately, I think it's going to be Gabriel. I think he wins it. And the funniest part about this too, Matt, is that Haaland has 22 goals in the league. And like everyone's just like, kind of off here, right? This guy's got another 8 games to play. He could hit 30. knowing him.
Yeah.
Who's stopping him from bagging like a couple braces and scoring like in almost every single game? He's that threatening. They don't have the Champions League too, by the way. That's what the conversation is. But ultimately, yeah, with Bruno Fernandes. Is there anything else that you kind of want to talk about or address, or maybe a player on the outside looking in that has an opportunity to win Player of the Season, or do you think it's really just down to whatever Arsenal player they pick, Holland, and then obviously Bruno Fernandes? I don't think there's anyone from Villa,
Yeah.
Liverpool, Chelsea, any of these clubs that I would pick. Um, Someone from Arsenal. Is there a person from Arsenal that you would pick specifically?
I just think when you look at how Arsenal have navigated this season, how they've gotten to this point being league leaders, it hasn't been on the backs of to your point, a bomber, a killer up front, right? We would assume that coming into the season, Saka would be that talismanic player, right? Because he had such exponential growth his first couple seasons. And you think, well, if Arsenal are going to win this, they got to lean on their top player, their top attacking player. Irrespective of what people thought and perceived of Gyökeres coming into the season, everyone was saying, okay, if Gyökeres is going to eat and he's going to get a bunch of goals, it's going to come from guys like Saka creating chances and scoring goals. And I think because we haven't seen a standout attacking player at Arsenal, I think that it would have to go to someone like Gabriel in defense. If City wind up turning this around and shocking everybody and winning the trophy, I think it's Haaland. And then I think, again, in the camp of Bruno Fernandes, if Manchester United can finish the job and Bruno finishes strong.
It's an insane conversation to even be having, because I don't like the awards and how they're awarded in these sports.
Yeah.
Because I think there's far too many individuals over time that you sit there and say, oh, just because he's not on the winning side, you're like, how is this guy not Player of the Year? I just when Haaland is like putting up the numbers like this, truthfully, like he's another guy that I'm like him and Bruno, for me, I'm easily picking them over anyone on Arsenal. Arsenal's the best team. This is player. It's individual. Bruno and Haaland have been better than that. You could even argue like Semenyo. Like Semenyo also like made that transfer over too in January, so it's kind of like a bit silly. But come on, it's like individual award. I don't think that we have to force ourselves to give this to a player on the best team, because when history will look back on this Arsenal and what we've seen from this Arsenal, they're a collective. It's not an individual that stands out above the rest. And sometimes that happens in collective teams too. I'm not saying that it's not the case, but I mean, at the end of the day, sure, you can give it to a defender, but defenders are a little bit tougher to gauge on like quality, because some matches Saliba's unbelievable. Other matches Gabriel is. And then Gabriel also like ends up scoring goals at a pretty respectable rate for a defender too. It's just a silly, interesting conversation. But Bruno Fernandes, like, I mean, say United end up getting second, right?
Yeah.
Say like that does happen, right? How do you really not do that? Because you're sitting there in November, right? Like, toss it back whenever like Amarim is in the rain, like with his like little shit on his like pad for the 11, and he's just like, it's like this guy's a dead man walking. If someone told you like United end up finishing second and Bruno's like getting disgusting like goal contributions, he's got 16 assists in the league.
But you're not even focusing on the chance creation, which he's blowing everybody out of the water with.
Yeah.
He's
No, I know
creating
that, but that's like that, but that like proves it though.
and
Like,
Sheshko is starting to take off too. Look, my final point is this: in the argument between whether it would be Gabriel, Haaland, or Bruno Fernandes, I think if Arsenal get the job done, I think you have every right to give it to Gabriel. But I think the question that you have to ask yourself, if you're, given a hypothetical vote towards him, is is he having the same level and impact defensively than Virgil van Dijk did during the Liverpool years, when Van Dijk was the best defender in football, and he was getting big, serious nods for the Ballon d'Or those years. Like, people were claiming he should be winning the Ballon d'Or. That's how prolific and dominant he was defensively. I think Gabriel's been amazing, but I don't think that he's been to that level of Van Dijk. And I think for that reason, again, we'll have to wait and see how the rest of the season shapes up. If Arsenal go on a defensive tear and they're a team that is impossible to break down. We get a bunch of clean sheets and they finish the job, and Gabriel's exceptional, then you can make the case. But I think right now there's still so many variables to observe the rest of the season that will ultimately dictate whether or not Bruno gets a Haaland or Gabriel.
Second in goals for midfielders is Bruno with 8. Obviously takes penalties, but so do these other players like Cole Palmer. 16 assists. 16 is insane. And as you mentioned, it took forever for Sesko to actually do something off the bench too. So like not many target options. But anyways, that'll wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the first episode. Got plenty of good feedback. We appreciate you guys tuning into this episode, a weekly occurrence that will happen, 4 to 5 subjects that we will be talking about, debating back and forth, that you could follow us at That Football Podcast. On here, you're going to be able to also subscribe and give us 5 stars, please, on Spotify and Apple, because the audio versions will also be uploaded of this as well. Again, give us your thoughts. Who should win Premier League Player of the Year? Will City beat Arsenal in the title? Will Italy finally make the World Cup? And is Mo Salah the best ever foreign signing out of the Premier League? Let us know. Take care.